Hey, hey, hey. Happy Sunday. Come on in the space. I am representing my alma mater today, University of Alabama. For those who don't follow college football, Tennessee, University of Tennessee beat Alabama yesterday for the first time, I think this 15, 16 years, basically since Alabama head coach Nick Saban came to Tuscaloosa. And so it was a good game. It was a good game with the exception of the penalties, record-setting penalties committed by Alabama. And of course, that's not something that normally happens, but it's been happening a lot this year. It's happened a couple of times. Not the number was 17, but it's been a high number against a couple of teams this year. But one thing I know about Coach Nick Saban is that he likes to use these kind of setbacks to reinforce some of the things that he likes to teach his team. And so I wish I could be a fly on the wall to hear what he's saying, but I thought it would be a really great way, using Alabama's example would be a really great way to talk about discipline, which is the topic tonight. But before we get started with that, if you are on LinkedIn or Facebook, please give your StreamYard permission to show your name, and that way I can see who's actually on the broadcast, and just say hello so that I know that you are here. So please do that for me. If you are here live, and even if you're here after the fact, you can let me know that you were here, that you watched the broadcast. I'm Renita Alexander, the Leadership Locksmith. This is Set It Up Sunday, and Set It Up Sunday is my weekly conversation that I have around the intentional choices you are making to do all the things that you want to do, whatever way you define success, that you can set yourself up for that success. Planning and scheduling is a part of that. And tonight's topic, discipline, really falls into that category because it's really all about execution. And it's about doing the things every day, every month, every year to help you become who you're trying to become. And that's what it's all about. So I actually started this series a couple of weeks ago about the things that help us lead ourselves better. So I started with self-awareness. That was my topic 2 weeks ago, as the first step in leading yourself well, which of course I always say is a precursor to leading others. And it's important in any relationship. So be it your personal or professional relationship, being aware of your values, your strengths, your emotional intelligence levels are all very important things to know about yourself. But as I discussed last week, self-awareness is not enough, especially if you discover some gaps between where it is that you are and where you want to be. And so getting where you really want to be can require some development based on whatever information you discovered. And so I used Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts as my example, my case study for development, because he's been the hot topic on all the NFL shows over the last few weeks, and is actually playing Dallas Cowboys. The Eagles are playing the Cowboys tonight. That game is, I think, already started. I'll be going to watch that as soon as I'm done here. But anyway, so tonight's topic, self-discipline, is, again, as I said earlier, all about execution. And so it's, the idea of training or developing, especially in self-control. And it can be a value, but it's also a learned behavior. So you can get better at the discipline thing. So again, as I started, when you think of a leader that has a strong, sense of self, as a willingness to grow better, that growth mindset that I also talked about last week, that leader is unstoppable. That leader is going to lead himself and his or her team to reach whatever goals and results that they want to reach. So anyway, for the last 2 weeks, I've been focused on 3 important aspects of effective leadership, and I'm going to continue that discussion on those 3 topics. I've talked about emotional intelligence. I've talked about your innate leadership strengths as well as your authentic values. Now, I use sports a lot. I used it last week because when you talk about sports, right, there's really no better way to talk about leadership and team and all of those things. And I, I'm blessed to be an alum of the University of Alabama and have been able to witness this dynasty that people keep predicting is going to die, but it's still alive. And of course, as Coach Saban told his team last night after the loss, they still have everything to play for. So I like to use teams, and again, I'm going to use the University of Alabama football team, the Crimson Tide, to talk about those things that I'm going to talk about. Now, I've talked about last week, I started with strengths when I was talking about Jalen Hurts. Tonight, I want to start with values. And I want to start with values because everything that Nick Saban has really implemented at the University of Alabama starts with his process. And the process is principles, are values, which include commitment, effort, toughness, pride, and of course, discipline, which is our topic tonight. So Nick Saban, Coach Saban, asked his team, to be committed. He asked them, how bad do you want it? And, he tells them that you get out of it what you put into it, which speaks to effort. And then he expects them to be tough. He says you got to overcome hard. And then to take pride in everything they do, and then to be disciplined. Actually, discipline was the second thing, but I wanted to save it for last. Nick Saban says it's not about what you feel like doing, because emotions are valid, but they're not always the best way to figure out what we should be doing. And so Coach Saban describes discipline as doing the right thing at the right time, every time, regardless of the talent of your competition. So you're playing to your standard, whatever that is. And that speaks to excellence. And so even though that starts with the leadership, or in this case, the leadership of the team, the coach of the team, that accountability to be disciplined can come from anywhere on the team. And one of the things I have loved about the University of Alabama is when you hear about those seasoned leaders, the juniors and seniors who have bought into the system and have been playing under the Coach Saban system for a minute, really bring those younger players under the fold. And they're quick to tell a younger player about the Alabama way of doing things. And so it's not just accountability from the coaching staff, but it's accountability for the peers, which I think is even more effective, right? I did hear one of the senior players talk about everybody not being on the same page. And of course, that's going to derail a team any time if everybody's not kind of walking in lockstep and executing in the same way. So that's the values piece. The next thing I want to talk about is strengths. And so you've heard me talk about the strength philosophy, which is you can only be really good at something that you're innately talented, you're innately gifted in. Obviously, all of these people are super athletes, or they wouldn't be at the University of Alabama. So I'm going to talk about them in a minute. I want to start with the head coach, Nick Saban. And one of Nick's strengths that I've observed over the last few years, and I've read lots of articles from writers, from journalists who have also talked about, as that is his agility. And so whatever football scheme the football gods have come up with, be it the run pass option or faster defensive players or more mobile quarterbacks, Nick Saban has adapted and made changes so that he can compete. He doesn't always like it, but he's been willing to adapt. And I think that speaks to the strength of the program. And then also another strength of the program as a whole is that continuity and that ability to maintain a winning culture by attracting those, not with the skills, because that is important, right? But with the right attitude, the attitude of excellence, and the maturity to come into a very competitive environment and stay engaged, even when they may not be starting. Right. Because, there's been times when, people have had to wait their turn. One of the favorite pictures that I see floating around the internet every now and then is the quarterback room back. I think it was the 2018 team with Mac Jones, Jalen Hurts, and Tua Tagovailoa, which are all quarterbacks in the NFL, starting quarterbacks in the NFL right now in 2022. Now, I talked about the maturity to come into a competitive environment, which speaks to the third thing, and that is emotional intelligence. Now, emotional intelligence refers to a person's ability to exert some self control. First, to recognize their emotions, which are valid. The emotions are valid. There are a way of telling us how we're experiencing the world, or reacting to our experiences. But the thing about emotional intelligence is the awareness and then self-control, the ability to kind of regulate our emotions, to empathize with others, to recognize how others are being impacted by what we're doing. And also it speaks to motivation in the face of setbacks. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the Crimson Tide respond to this setback. But anyway, and Daniel Goleman, who is one of my favorite gurus who talks about this, says that emotional intelligence is a much more accurate predictor of success, especially for those in leadership positions. But let's start at the top with this emotional intelligence. Now, you've seen Nick Saban roaming up and down the sideline, and sometimes he gets a little hysterical. But that aside, he has really shown agility and adaptability, which I spoke to before as one of his strengths, but he's in this area also. So much was written last year about his softer, more gentle approach with last year's younger team. And he sounded very philosophical last night in his press conference, again, speaking to what the fact that they still have everything that they planned at the beginning ahead of them, that they can still be what they want to be and do what they want to do if they have the discipline to execute. One of the things in general that I always admire about athletes who execute at a high level is their ability to stay in the present moment. And I don't know if that was not the case last night. I mean, obviously these people are still young. I mean, a lot of the folks that played last year are back, but these are teens. They're still developing that frontal cortex, that frontal lobe. So I'm not sure if they were not able to stay in the present moment or not able to execute in the very hostile environment that they were in. But I know that Nick Saban is going to address all of that. So how can you use Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide's example to practice your own self-discipline and execute on your values, your strengths, and your emotional intelligence? Well, first of all, let me just say, and I think I've said this before, but just in case I haven't, give yourself some grace if, for instance, you didn't execute, you weren't disciplined on whatever it is that you were trying to do, okay? Tomorrow is always an opportunity to start again. And even in those cases where your actions may not reflect your best self-discipline can help you learn from your mistakes and position yourself to make different and better choices, to make different and better decisions, to execute according to whatever plan that you've created for yourself. And so for these areas of focus, or whatever it is you're trying to improve, take what you've identified. Step one, you've identified the areas that you need to improve in, and also then the steps when it comes to self-development, the steps to your goal, and document them. So document them somewhere as a first step to accountability. And then you can also share those with a friend or a mentor or a coach like me to help you be accountable. The second thing I want to share is to remove any temptations or distractions. So, one of the things I discovered in my retirement years is this love for crunchy peanut butter. I hated it as a child, but as an adult, I like it. But one of the things I also noticed is I could eat like a whole jar in like a really record amount of time. So I have to be very judicious in how I buy peanut butter, because I don't want it in the house, because I don't always have the willpower to refrain from eating it, which leads me to another thing, and that is that mindset, that growth mindset about limiting, to remove any limiting beliefs that I may have about my ability to be disciplined or to have the willpower to do or not to do what it is that I don't or that I do want to do. And then so that may look like that, for values, all of that may look like reminders in the form of a vision board. When it comes to executing strengths, it might mean intentionally scheduling activities that are going to expand your strengths or even turn what you are innately gifted in into a superpower. And again, that requires a little planning, which I said this execution piece is a little bit more of the planning, and actually this discipline piece is more about the planning and putting things in place that are going to help you do what you want to do. And then, of course, when it comes to emotional intelligence, I talk about curiosity a lot. So, once you have you've found out what it is that you need to grow, what areas you need to grow in, being curious about what it is you're doing every day, how you're acting, how you're showing up every day, and then reinforcing your commitment to show up the way that you want to, and then spending some time reflecting on what you could have done differently or better, et cetera, et cetera. Because again, when it comes to, those emotions, you got to be curious about what you're doing. They're valid, but, they don't always lead you in the direction that you want to go. Your deepening awareness of your development of your efforts to actually act on those things that you need to do is going to help turn all of the things that you innately do well into help you be the most effective leader. Even if you're just leading yourself, you're going to be the most effective leader that you can be. Okay, my time is up. I got to get to that Eagles Dallas Cowboys game. I will be talking about next week some of the things that keep us from executing what we know we need to do. So it's self-sabotage. That's the topic for next week. And I hope you join me. I'll be here right back here at 7:30 Central Standard Time. I'll be live. Join me. Have a great rest of your evening. Go Eagles.